So let's move on to the battle log. And there are certainly many ways of implementing such a log. I want to have a log where we can add messages that basically keep track of which action occurred and who started this action and which value was connected to this action. For example, how much damage was dealt. For that, we should go back to app.js and add a new method here, which could be called addLogMessage because that is what we're going to do. This method should take three parameters. It should take the information who did something. So I'm going to name it who. Then I want to know what happened. Did we attack? Did we heal? So I'm going to add a what here. And I need to know the value. How much damage was dealt? How much did we heal for? So these are the three parameters we need here. Who, what, and value. And with this information, I want to add a new log message to a growing list of log messages, which then can be output here in this battle log on the screen. Hence, what do we need? A data property, an array of log messages, which can change and which view tracks to be aware of changes so that it updates the UI when it changed. So therefore here, I'm going to add a log messages array, which is empty initially. And whilst we're at it, we can also already reset it to an empty array when we start a new game. So set log messages back to an empty array here. But now that we got log messages, in add log message, I want to add a new log message to this array whenever this method is called. And I want to add it at the beginning of the array so that the latest message is always right on top. So it's the first one in the array. And we can do this by reaching out to log messages and using unshift. Unshift is basically like push, but where push adds something at the end of the array, unshift adds something at the beginning of the array. And now it's up to you how a log message should look like. Thus far in the course, in the other lectures and modules, when we worked with lists and arrays and v-for, we always had arrays full of strings, full of text. Here, since we have three pieces of information that matter, I will actually add an object to this array. So a log message is an object. And you will see how we can output this on the screen in just a second. So here I will now add different pieces of information to this object, the who, what, and value to be precise. And I'll name the key action by who, action type what, and action value, the value we got. So we add an object to our log messages, which has three keys, action by, action type, and action value, so that we know who did the action, which kind of action it was, and what the value of the action was. That's how we add log messages. And now a new log message should be added when we, for example, attack the monster. So here in attack monster, before the monster attacks us, I want to call add log message, so this newly added method, and set the who to player, because the player attacked the monster, want to set the action to attack, and pass in the attack value, like this. Now, when the monster attacks us here in attack player, I also want to add a log message, but now it's the monster who attacked us for this given attack value, which we derive here as well. Of course, we do the same for the special attack. Here, the player attacks the monster. We could also name this special attack, but that's really up to you how you want to handle those different types later. I will not differentiate between special attack and regular attack, so I will just name it attack here as well. If you would want to add such a differentiation, you could use a different identifier here, but I'll stick to attack. And last but not least, for healing here, the player heals himself for the heal value. So that is the log message I want to add here. So now we got these different log messages being added. With that, our log messages array will grow. And now the question is how we output those messages. In index.html, we got this unordered list here in our battle log. And this unordered list should render a bunch of list items. As I mentioned before, you don't need to use a list item to use v-for. v-for can be used on any element. But since we're outputting lists of data and we want to write semantically correct code, often you will use v-for on list items because that is the semantically correct HTML element, well, for list items. That's just a side note. The more important thing, of course, here is that we use v-for though. A nice view directive we learned about, which can help us with outputting list content. It allows us to repeat this list item element and create it as often as needed to have one list item HTML element on the screen per item in our log messages array. So therefore here we need to refer to log messages and go through it with the in keyword and then get access to every single log message, which we now can use on and inside of this repeated list item. And now here, the content we want to output, of course, is fully up to you. We could use interpolation here to output the action by field, which is one of the three fields we add as a log message, which basically indicates who did something. Then we could add a dash and a new piece of interpolation here to output log message action type so that we know what happened. And then another dash and another piece of interpolation here to output our action value. That's something we could do. With that, we would output who did something, what happened, and which value was associated. And if we save that and reload, indeed you will see if I click attack here, we have these two log messages where we see that the player attacked for 6 and thereafter the monster attacked for 8. And that's a nice start, but actually I prepared some styles to output this in a nicer way. So let's actually use those. And therefore I'm going to get rid of that and instead add a span here, a span element, which actually should hold the initiator of the action. So this action by field. So here I want to access log message and check if action by is equal to player, in which case I want to print player here with a capital P. Otherwise it'll be the monster, so I'll then output that. So a little ternary expression here. I also want to have a second span thereafter, which holds the type of action that happened. And here we either dealt damage or we healed ourselves. So with vif, I'm going to check if log message action type is equal to heal, in which case here I want to say heals himself, so that we say something like player heals himself, 4, and then of course the amount of healing done, which I'll wrap in another span, simply so that I can later add some styling to highlight the value. And into this second span here, I'll add the log message action value, which is the amount for which we healed here. And I'll give this span here a CSS class of log-heal, which is one of the prepared CSS classes here to simply color the amount by which we healed green. That's the only reason why I have this extra span here, so that I can add an extra CSS class just to this heal value text. Now this was one option. I need another span next to this general heals himself span, and that is for the scenario that we actually dealt damage, that we did not heal ourselves. Here we can use velse because dealing damage is the only other option we have in this game. And therefore here I'll say attacks, so that we say something like player attacks, and deals And now again, output the damage in a span so that we can add an extra CSS class. In this case, the log -- damage class, which is a prepared CSS class to give it a red color. And output the damage value again in that special span so that we take advantage of this highlighting of this special CSS style. So here we have log message.action value again. So this is now how we could structure this. I also want to add a CSS class here to this first class to highlight who did something. And for that, I'll dynamically add a class here because I want to add different classes depending on whether we have the player or the monster doing something here. So I'll add this object syntax here and add a class of log -- player, which is another prepared class here, this one, if action by is the player, and add log -- monster if the action was started by the monster. You need single quotes around those keys here, by the way, since we're in a JavaScript object here, and dashes in property names are not allowed without wrapping the whole property name into quotes. With quotes, though, they are allowed. So that's why you need single quotes around your property names here. And the values of these properties here, as you learned, need to be values that indicate whether or not those classes should be added to that span. So you need true or false here in the end. And therefore we can simply check if log message action by is equal to player here. If that is true, I want to add the log player class. If that's false, I don't want to add it. And for adding log monster, I want to check if log message action by is equal to monster. And of course, only one of the two will be true at a given time. And that's my logic here. Now, this is quite long, but outsourcing this into a computed property would actually not really be possible because this does not depend on some general data property, but on a concrete value we get for this exact list item which is being rendered. So if you would want to outsource this into JavaScript code, you would indeed need to use a method to which you pass log message action by, for example, because that is not a single value managed application wide, but that depends on which list item is being rendered. That's just a side note. With that, however, if we save that and reload, if we now attack, we see something like monster attacks and deals 12, player attacks and deals 6. If we heal, we see player heals himself for 9, and thereafter the monster attacked us for 13, so that didn't help too much. This now looks better, and so on. So this all seems to work. Now we got a log, and if the game is over, we can inspect the whole log. If we start a new game, it's of course reset as it should be, because in start game, we set the log messages to an empty array again. And that is the finished game here. That actually is a nice first project which shows all the core features we learned about, like interpolation, vbind, von, different events, methods, computed, watch, vif, v4. It's all in here, and therefore I hope that this project helps you get a better understanding of Vue, the different pieces that make up Vue, and how they all work together. Now we're really well prepared to dive deeper into Vue.